委員大家好，咁我哋而家
Good morning. I call the meeting to order. This is the 5th meeting of the Subcommittee to study Population Policy and Initiative. We have one item on the agenda, that is education planning required for Hong Kong's development. Let's invite the administration to come in.
好，咁跟住呢，喺呢度呢，就邀請有意發言嘅委員呢，就撳掣去到。
Members who would like to speak, please press the request to speak button.
好，如果政府當局係
Let's invite Mr. Jeff Z, Undersecretary for Education, to present the paper. Good morning. This is the new year, so I wish you all a happy new year. I thank the subcommittee for their concern on education planning in Hong Kong. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to give you information about education planning of the government for Hong Kong's development. When education thrives, the country thrives. Education is a key factor for the development of our country. It is also the foundation for the development of a strong nation and also national rejuvenation. We have 3 strategic pillars, namely building the country through science and education, building a talent-rich country, and driving development through innovation. The chief executive has the mission of building Hong Kong into an international education hub and a cradle for future talents. So we will give you information about STEAM education and building Hong Kong into an international tertiary education hub, as well as our work on building VPET, vocational and professional education. Of course, I will discuss with you other matters relating to education. Regarding promoting STEAM education, we will set up the Steering Committee on Strategic Development of Digital Education to promote STEAM education and enhance information technology and education for the integration of INT into the education curriculum. Well, we will introduce the primary science from the 25th and 26th school. We will also do better in the interfacing of primary and secondary level. The new curriculum will start in 27 and 28 school year. Schools may try out the curriculum in 25-26 school year. We will also launch a pilot scheme to promote AI-assisted teaching in junior secondary science. We will also arrange for teachers to attend professional training to carry out classroom training practice. Our goal is that in 26-27, 35% of students of UGC-funded universities will study in STEAM subjects, and 60% of them will study in subjects relevant to Hong Kong's development into the 8 centers. We will make use of the triennial planning exercise. We will work with the UGC to nurture more talents to match the manpower needs of Hong Kong in this regard. In the 2024 policy address, the chief executive proposed the establishment of the Committee on Education, Technology and Talents. It will focus on 3 major directions, that is, to enhance the system aggregation and synergy of policies to promote integrated coordination of the work in the development of education, technology and talents. We will also work on organizing exhibitions and seminars in relation to education. We will attract more non-local students from ASEAN and Belt and Road countries. At the same time, the government will continue to support the parallel development of self-financing education tertiaries. These self-financing institutions are flexible. They can cater to the needs of the market. They also provide multiple pathways. We will introduce the amendment of post-secondary colleges education, that is CAP 302, Post-Secondary Colleges Ordinance. We will also update the Institutional Review Manual to enhance governance as well as quality assurance. We have diversity in our education policies. Apart from self-financing institutes and UGC-funded institutions, we also have a VPET. In February 2024, we have announced the criteria as well as the mechanism for UAS studies at University of Applied Sciences. Earlier this year, the St. Francis University as well as the Hong Kong Metropolitan University have gone through the reviews. They will be the first 2 UAS in Hong Kong. Cultivating values and nurturing people is the core mission of education. We work on building our country into a country that is strong in education. So we will work on our work, we will nurture talent, we will enhance the impetus of development of our economy. I will be happy to answer questions. We have with us 8 members who would like to speak. They are Nixie Lam, Chen Xiu-hong, Ngan Men Yu, Chow Men Kwong, Kang Fei, Benson Luk, Eunice Yung, and Judy Chan. We have sufficient time, so everyone will have 5 minutes. We'll first hear from Nixie Lam. Thank you, Undersecretary, for the introduction. I would like to say something about education planning as well as inter-exchanges. To make Hong Kong a better city in international education, we need to do more. We can see Beijing, Shanghai, Singapore, Tokyo, there are quality education institutions. Do we have any exchanges or interactions with these prestigious schools in these places? Do you have any plans to identify potential parties to conduct exchanges? You understand that the competitiveness of these cities are comparable to that of Hong Kong. If we can do better in terms of exchanges, then it will be a very strong network. Now I turn to languages. We have bilingualism as well as the 3 languages. Do you offer choices to students? When I was studying in Australia, I could choose Spanish or French. There may not be much use of these languages in Hong Kong, but they are languages that are spoken by a lot of people in the world. Now is a technology era. You don't need to learn a lot of things by rote. The direction is different. Now you have to train people to be all-rounded. If you can enhance their foreign languages or their skills to interact with other people, that would be much better. Undersecretary, thank you. In Hong Kong, there are 52 international schools. They offer a variety of curricula. They cover curricula of different countries. They also offer the IB curriculum. So there are plenty of choices for local and non-local families studying in international schools. The member talked about interaction with international schools in other cities. The international schools themselves have this kind of exchanges. Under the IB curriculum, there is a requirement that regular visits with other places Sponsors of Hong Kong international schools are also sponsors of international schools on the mainland and cities in the Asia Pacific. But there is a sponsor that operates schools in Hong Kong and in Bangkok. It will be easier for them to arrange for exchanges. We encourage international schools to do more. I do agree with Ms. Lam about expanding our circle of friends. This initiative will expand students' horizons, and it will also be beneficial for the schools and for their teachers. The other matter, learning foreign languages. The chief executive in this year's policy address specifically mentioned that from junior secondary school there is a pilot scheme. It's funded by Quality Education Fund. The initiative is to strengthen the learning of foreign languages. Under DSE, there are 6 languages for students to choose from. We heard comments that it will be late to start learning another language in junior secondary. You need to start earlier. We have a plan to get students to learn foreign languages from junior secondary. In addition to the foreign language curricula under the ESC, we will also organize courses of languages spoken in Belt and Road countries, say Arabic or Russian. I replied to an oral question in LegCo on strengthening the learning of foreign languages. We will continue to strengthen our efforts in the school environment in this regard. Next, Mr. Chen Sil-hong. Education is very important to nurture talents and to cultivate values. It is very important for our future generation. I see that in 24-25, the government spent $100 billion on education. We are a subcommittee to study population policies and initiatives. So in relation to education planning, are the government's efforts targeted? There are a few important points. Internationalness or internationalization is very important. In the paper, it talks about building Hong Kong into an international education hub. But how do we do it? Well, you have 3 strategic approaches to enhance our education and planning. Our country would like Hong Kong to strengthen our role as a super connector and as a metropolitan city. If we can nurture, if we can do something about giving an international horizon to students, then you need to start from primary and secondary school. This is a very important stage for the development of children, primary and secondary education. We don't just compare Hong Kong with mainland cities. We are also we need to also compare ourselves with other international cities as well. Nick C. Lam talked about international schools. There is a huge demand for places in international schools. The government's approach is to let the market decide. So school sponsors decide on who get into their schools as well as relevant policies. Have you compiled statistics? Well, given the various migration schemes, what is the projected demand in the coming 5 to 10 years for international school places? Will you remove barriers to make it easier for school sponsors to put in place more school places or more dormitory facilities? The government wants to build the brand Study in Hong Kong. If we do that, that means the demand for accommodation will increase. There are guardian families, there are families that provide accommodation. Will you formulate guidelines to regulate the development of this market? Will you draw reference from Australia and the UK to enhance regulation and to ensure quality?
Undersecretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for your questions. Member is correct. We need to build Hong Kong into an international education hub. The focus is on post-secondary institutions. This is related to the other two questions put by members. We need to expand capacity and improve quality. In this school year, for non-local students, the UGC-funded undergraduate programs ratio will increase from 20% to 40%. We also work on providing hostel facilities. Schools will have to collaborate in relation to software as well as hardware. The aim is to promote an inclusive culture at university so that for students coming to Hong Kong to study, they will have a better experience. This is important. That's why we focus on post-secondary education. In relation to primary and secondary education, we agree that we need to build an environment of biliteracy and trilingualism. There are a lot of internationalization elements in the design of local curricula. The aim is to broaden the horizons of local students. It's difficult to organize exchange tours for primary school students. This may be more common in secondary schools. Students will partake in international competitions or exchange. We have an education fund within the Education Bureau to provide subsidies to schools to bring students to overseas countries to take part in different activities. In relation to the supply and demand of school places, we will keep a close watch. We will also closely monitor different talent admission schemes and the changes in the supply and demand in school places. There's a greater demand for school places. This is our observation. So we have made available two sites, one in Kowloon Tong, the other in North Point. We are working on a school campus allocation initiative, and we aim to provide 1,000 international school places. In relation to hostel places, we have a fund. By 2027, UGC-funded universities will increase a total of 13,500 hostel places. As announced in the policy address, we will improve facilities in relation to hostels. And the Education Bureau will also work with the Development Bureau to launch a pilot scheme in the first half of this year. We'll encourage the market to convert hotels and other commercial buildings into student hostels on a self-financing and privately funded basis. We aim to streamline procedures in order to encourage the market to adopt a self-financing approach to convert hotels and other commercial buildings. The aim is to provide student hostels and increase the places that could be provided. In this connection, we will work with the Development Bureau, and we will also report to the Council when there are more updates. I have a quick follow-up. The Undersecretary mentioned exchange tours or study tours. This is quite time-consuming, and it also takes a lot of money. We can conduct online exchanges. Activities can be held online. This can broaden the horizons of local students. This is a suggestion. Please take note of it. Thank you. Next member, Dr. Yaman Yu. I have two questions. One in relation to non-local students studying at universities in Hong Kong. The ratio is higher, as we all know. So how can we compete for students from the Southeast Asian region? In Malaysia, I got in touch with privately operated secondary schools. They aren't aware of the change in the policy in Hong Kong. My next question is, the government has a fiscal deficit right now. Is there any room for increasing the fares of education programs for non-local students? Next, in relation to talent admission schemes, how can we make enhancements to provide a better pathway for students of talents coming to Hong Kong so that we can retain these talents with their children being able to study in Hong Kong with a better education experience? Undersecretary. Thank you, Dr. Frankie An. In relation to attracting non-local students who study in Hong Kong, there is an internationalization group among principals or presidents in local universities. There are overseas activities to strengthen efforts to attract non-local students who come to Hong Kong to study at university, including the holding of international exhibitions, conventions, seminars, in order to strengthen the work on student admissions. Universities have a lot of experience in student admissions. In order to expand the market, sometimes we need to go to overseas countries to establish connections with them. Holding international conferences or seminars is one of the methods. Sometimes we want to attract high-caliber students in secondary schools to Hong Kong, and we do need to work on this front. We can also leverage on the alumni network. Say Malaysia, quite many students study in Hong Kong, and upon graduation, they return to Malaysia to work or to settle. Universities keep connections with the alumni. We can set up alumni associations so that they can help with the promotion of local universities. In relation to school fees for non-local students, if we can increase school fees, of course we can increase the revenue, but we do want to keep school fees competitive. If we are to increase school fees, we will undermine the appeal of studying in Hong Kong for non-local students. Comparing with Tokyo, Singapore, for example, these are our neighboring competitors. We are on a comparable level with them. If we substantially increase school fees, for instance, Dr. Frankie Ngan asked about Malaysia. Those students may choose to study in Singapore instead of coming to Hong Kong, and this is exactly what we need to take into account. In relation to the dependents under the Top Talent Pass Scheme TTPS, we didn't conduct any breakdown analyses in relation to the dependents coming to Hong Kong under different talent admission schemes. When these dependents come to Hong Kong, they are no different from local students. They can study in publicly funded schools. They are no different from local students. They pay the school fees that are paid by local students, so there is no further breakdown in this regard. Thank you. Thank you, Undersecretary. Next, Professor Chow Man Kong. Thank you, Chairman. In G19, we discussed in the Council population policies. The number of DSU students decreased from 74,000 to 43,000. And if we do not discuss the matter in relation to a declining population, it's not going to be very helpful. At the end of 2024, the Chief Executive said that we have to maintain our competitive edge in relation to school closure and declining school sizes, class sizes, as well as declining birth rate. There's little mention in this paper. I understand the Bureau has been working on this, but this is simply a drop in the bucket. For non-local students, what policies do you have? What concrete plans do you have? Reduction of class sizes, closure of schools, these are oftentimes what teachers, parents, and students can think of. We need to buck this trend. We need to stop this from happening. If we need to build Hong Kong into an international education hub, we need to have the participation of privately operated universities as well. In relation to MMT, that is the student admission from Macau and so on. What is the progress of the update of the relevant guideline? This is also one of the important avenues to increase student intake. We have 80,000 SEN students. For families that have an SEN student, basically parents will find it difficult to go out to work. They will have to stay home and take care of their SEN children. What measures does the Bureau have? There's a long wait in relation to medical services in public hospitals. For training vouchers, medical healthcare vouchers, carer support, subsidies, can you do more in order to release the workforce potential? At present, the potential is below 60%. There are close to 80,000 SEN students, and their parents cannot go out to work. And this will affect the labor supply. Thank you.
謝周議員。
Under Secretary, I thank Mr. Chow for his questions in 3 areas regarding primary and secondary schools. Our policy to build Hong Kong into an international education hub is on tertiary education, in that we need to provide supporting measures. If we adopt the same approach in secondary and primary schools, then we need to put in place similar supporting measures as well. For non-government primary and secondary schools, if there is sufficient supporting arrangements in place, they can take in non-local students. If they have enrolled non-local students who are minors and unaccompanied by their parents, then the schools will have to put in place arrangements and services to take care of the welfare of the students. Say, for example, guardians, sufficient support, care, accommodation, and counseling services. These schools need to make sure that non-local primary and secondary students will be well taken care of. I used to teach in direct subsidy schools. I've taught non-local students, so the policy allows that. However, when young children come to Hong Kong on their own to study, then without supporting measures, it will be difficult. Members asked a number of times about self-financing institutions recruiting students from Macau, mainland, and other places, and the difficulties they encounter. We have been having close liaison with the Ministry of Education of our country. There are currently 6 self-financing tertiary institutions enrolling non-local students. So these are graduate programs. Well, as I said, we maintain a close liaison with the Ministry of Education. They have heard our views. The member asked about SEN students with special education needs. In another subcommittee, we had a discussion about students with special needs. In terms of funding allocation, we have greatly increased the amount of funding in recent years. We take care of SEN students in mainstream schools and special schools. This shows that the government attaches importance to the needs of special needs students. So other than education needs, we also take into account their needs in other areas. When a student is at school, they will be suitably taken care of. But when the student goes home, I think that's what the member's question was about, is about childcare services. Then it's beyond the realms of education. For some special schools, there is dormitory service. When it comes to care of different aspects of special needs students, I think we need to bring together different departments to discuss about it. Mr. Tang Fei, I'll focus on population policy. I really appreciate the government's efforts at the internationalization of tertiary education institutes. That includes postgraduate vocational education. Do you have any plans to make sure that students are internationalized and teaching staffs also internationalized in VPED tertiary education institutes or University of Applied Science? Well, you mentioned that there is no specific policy. That's fine. But UAS, Universities of Applied Science, is the global trend. So if we have integrated or comprehensive university curriculum, then we need to have internationalized VPED tertiary educations. In 2024, mainland China and Indonesia signed a number of agreements that include setting up VPED in Indonesian education development in Tianjin. Both countries are working on setting up standards. The LegCo has visited Indonesia. I myself has done so too. Indonesia said that they attach importance on supporting the development of education in mainland China. I'm not talking about Indonesia specifically, but it's about internationalization of VPED tertiary education. Wang Yi also talked about internationalization and cooperation with other countries. One of the initiatives is sister schools with Japanese schools and mainland schools. So will this be extended to Hong Kong? Well, there are a number of sister schools between Hong Kong and mainland schools. There are also similar initiatives with other places. Say, well, the one that I study in is a sister school with a school in Singapore. So can these overseas sister schools be extended to Hong Kong? What is the policy of international schools in Hong Kong? They serve non-local families or more? On the mainland, there is the international school. There are schools for children of expatriates. But in Hong Kong, there is no such differentiation. So Hong Kong international schools, are they schools for children of expatriates or are they for local families as well? If it is the latter, then you need to pay attention to fairness. Just now, the Undersecretary talked about 2 slots. I'm not sure about the site in Kowloon Tong, but I visited the one in North Point, and I'm quite sure that it's going to be used by an international school. The government gives land for school sponsors to run an international school. I believe that the majority of the students will be coming from local Hong Kong families. So I think it boils down to the policy objective of international schools in Hong Kong. Undersecretary, you've asked questions in 3 areas. First, developing Hong Kong into an international education hub and one for international post-secondary education. Well, we have the 8 UGC-funded schools as well as University of Applied Sciences and VPED tertiary institutions. We have currently 2 UAS. In November last year, there was the Alliance of UAS. The work of the alliance has been mapped out. They will enhance collaboration and exchange with overseas UAS. In terms of attracting non-local VPET students to come to study in Hong Kong, that's something that they would do. They will also enhance exposure in overseas places. They will also organize expos and fairs. In relation to setting of standards as well as working out the details of cooperation with other places, I think we'll leave it to the alliance. Will Hong Kong form sister schools with schools in other places other than those on the mainland? Yes, it can be done and is allowed. A member talked about having virtual interaction with overseas schools. If a sister school relationship is formed, then there can be exchanges. Schools are given the free rein to form sister schools. Our focus currently is on the mainland. There are a lot of schools that are sister schools with those in Hong Kong, and these mainland schools are from Guangdong province. Schools in other provinces are interested in forming relationships with Hong Kong schools. We welcome schools from our country and from other countries as well. The positioning of international schools in Hong Kong is very clear. This is to provide school services to the children of non-local residents who come to Hong Kong to work. I mentioned that sites are made available by the government for organizations to use as international schools. For international schools, we require that at least 70% of the student population to be non-local students. So local students will only form the minority. When it comes to school premises allocation exercises, there is an incentive added. If the school sponsor undertakes that the population of non-local students will be more than 70%, then more points will be given. So the main objective is to provide school services to non-local students. Next, Benson Look. We're here to talk about education planning required for Hong Kong's development. I've been following up on increasing the quantity of dormitory places. We need to speed up the provision as well. There is a very tight demand. There is a very tight supply. Dormitories are not just a place to live for students. It's also an important area for all-rounded education. In 2023 policy address, the Chief Executive talked about building Hong Kong into an international post-secondary education hub. In this year's policy address, the idea or the proposal of study in Hong Kong brand is floated. So we're talking about the entire package. The demand for student dormitory will increase. The Undersecretary said that in the first half of 2025, there will be a pilot scheme in terms of the provision of hostel facilities. Barriers will be removed in relation to streamlining the processes of applications relating to planning lands and building plans. So what barriers have you removed? How have you expedited the process? It's also mentioned in paragraph 13 that sites are available for the private sector to build new hostels having regard to market demand. How many sites are you talking about? How many dormitories will be provided using government sites? My second point is about the Northern Metropolis University Town. It's said that there will be flexibility built in for the development of student dormitories. It's rather vague. What kind of flexibilities are you talking about? How many hostel places are you talking about in the Northern Metropolis University Town?
三方面
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Benson-Look, for your questions. Just now, I talked about in the first half of this year, the Education Bureau and the Development Bureau will launch a pilot scheme in processing applications. Oftentimes, organizations will have to reach out to different bureaus in the government in order to convert hotels and other commercial buildings into student hostels. We act as a coordinator. Usually, organizations will have to get in touch with quite many bureaus. We want to remove barriers in order to streamline the application process. So for organizations that are interested in converting hotels and other commercial buildings into student hostels, we want to provide a one-stop shop for these organizations. In the regulation of buildings, for instance, to convert commercial buildings into student hostels, the cap on the gross livable floor area may be exceeded even if there is no additional work. We are still exploring this area. Student hostels are actually residential units, so they are actually different from commercial buildings. At this stage, we encourage modification or conversion, say converting hotels into student hostels. When the government makes available a site, it's usually more time-consuming if we are to build student hostels from scratch. Conversion is not as time-consuming. We are in close liaison with different educational institutions in relation to what suggestions they have. Regarding hostel facilities, I understand they are indispensable. We are going to have the Northern Metropolis University Town. We want to further develop our international post-secondary education hub. When we attract non-local students to come to Hong Kong, of course, we do need hostels. And great flexibility is important. Universities can share student hostels. At present, student hostels are only for one educational institution. However, in the future, the Northern Metropolis University Town occupies a vast area. Say, in the entire Ngau Tam Mei, we have a spacious area for post-secondary institutions. So we may have sports facilities nearby in order to enrich the learning experience for students. There could also be libraries, for example. We keep an open mind and we want to encourage flexibility and innovation in relation to planning that will be conducive to the development of the Northern Metropolis University town. Next, Ms. Eunice Young, Deputy Chair. Thank you, Chairman. Education planning required for our development is close to my heart. The Undersecretary talks a lot about education policies. Just now, Professor Chow mentioned that the Chief Executive has already said we have a target population in Hong Kong. Population projections are about 8 million people. When the Chief Executive has a target of 10 million population, that means an increase of 2 million people. So if we aim to attract non-locals, we oftentimes talk about the children of TTPS applicants. 56,000 have already come to Hong Kong. They are the children of the talents that have come to Hong Kong. Their school fees are only 1/3 of those of local students. The Undersecretary said the children of these imported talents are also local students. Is the definition actually too wide? For local universities, primary and secondary schools, can we absorb the demand of non-local students when we cast the definition of local students too wide? Going to university is the ultimate goal of students, and I believe when we cast the definition of local students too wide, local parents will not be happy about it. So can we narrow the definition of local students? The government has a fiscal deficit of $100 billion. So can we attract more non-local students so that we can address the fiscal deficit and we can also allay the concerns of local parents? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Chair, for your questions. In relation to education planning, of course, we work on school place planning. There is 9 years of free education for students. There is also 12 years of free education in Hong Kong. Quality and quantity are equally important. Not long ago, people scramble for school places. In the Northern District, there is a long wait for school places in kindergartens. It was due to the upsurge in the number of students in a short period of time. So we do need to plan well in relation to school places. There are 18 districts in Hong Kong and there are 36 school nets for primary schools. We need to provide sufficient school places for new arrivals. We need to have a good idea of where they live. We understand that parents have schools that they want their children to go to. Competition is still keen, despite a decrease in the local birth rates. Primary one student admissions are still on the rise. So it has come to our attention that there are popular schools where the competition is particularly keen. As for private schools or direct subsidy schools, DSS, there are student admissions arrangements or mechanisms. Well, Chairman, I'd like to cut in. The Undersecretary mentioned primary and secondary schools, but I'm talking about the definition of local students for universities. Without long-term planning, this will be unfair to local parents. So I hope the Bureau will focus on the questions put by members. I'm asking about school places at universities. There are many intermediaries in relation to emigration. There are concerned groups of emigration or universities, and this is close to their heart. So how can we make it fair for local parents? Undersecretary, when these students have come to Hong Kong, for those below the age of 18, they come to Hong Kong as dependents. When they study in Hong Kong, they are no different from a local student in Hong Kong. When they are below the age of 18, whether they come to Hong Kong at 5 or 17 years old, according to our definition, they come to Hong Kong as a dependent. So from the perspective of education, they are no different from a local student. I started with primary and secondary schools because when these students have come to Hong Kong, they are primary or secondary school students. When they come to Hong Kong below the age of 18, then they are no different from local students. Just now, Deputy Chair asked about university admissions. In relation to the definition, we have heard members. As I have already explained to members, the Education Bureau is considering different proposals. We are pondering over the definition of local students in relation to student admissions. We need to conduct holistic planning. Different proposals have different pros and cons, and we do need to take into account the feasibility of different proposals before we make a final decision. Thank you. Ms. Judy Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the concern of Deputy Chair. The Undersecretary just now mentioned that they are reviewing the situation holistically. It is not that local parents do not welcome non-local students. As legislators, we support Hong Kong in building the brand of studying in Hong Kong. We want to attract more talents to come to Hong Kong. But as Mr. Chen Xiu-hong said, this is being used as a business opportunity. Many intermediaries said that they could help non-locals to come to Hong Kong as a local student. We've heard from many local parents. We do welcome them to come to Hong Kong, and we want them to settle into Hong Kong to integrate into our society. They can come to Hong Kong as a secondary school student before they are admitted to local universities. And Undersecretary, you do need to quicken the pace. We are seeing an increase in the number of students. We don't want to affect the situation in which local students get into local universities. My next question is about publicity. As mentioned in the papers, you mentioned strengthening the efforts of publicity in relation to Belt and Road Scholarship. A declining birth rate is a concern among secondary and primary school students. They are in face of school closure risks. Some schools hold education conferences to promote their schools outside Hong Kong. For smaller schools or more dependent schools, they may not have the resources required. So, on the Belt and Road Scholarship, will you consider bringing these secondary schools to the Belt and Road regions to hold talks, seminars, and so on? Without coordination, it would be quite difficult for them. In relation to STEM education, I know the government has spent quite a lot of resources on promoting STEM education. For publicly funded schools, they're hamstrung by the resources or the STEM education atmosphere. Some mainland schools have an entire floor for the development of STEM education. We have a lack of space. But for schools that have already been closed, can the schools in the same district share these vacant premises in order to promote STEM education? Thank you.
多謝陳議員。
Undersecretary, the questions are on 3 areas. First, how do we encourage parents who come to Hong Kong under the talent admission schemes or the top talent pass scheme to get their students to enter our education system as soon as possible? Well, if the children come to Hong Kong to study sooner, then it will be easier for them to adapt. Experience told us that for children to come to Hong Kong when they're already in senior secondary schools, it's difficult for them to integrate and learn, say, the complicated or traditional characters of Chinese. We support schools to host or organize booths in fairs to publicize themselves. Yes, school sponsors may organize their own booths in education fair. Just now, Ms. Chen talked about the size of some school sponsors. Small ones may find it difficult to have publicity efforts. They can work together with other schools as well. Can they join our delegations to visit Belt and Road countries? Well, currently, only non-publicly funded primary and secondary schools can enroll non-local students. Publicly funded primary and secondary schools are free for students, so they don't enroll non-local students because these students need to pay a fee. Children from Belt and Road countries, if they come to Hong Kong, they need to have some understanding of Chinese. we see that among the Belt and Road countries, there are some that have strengthened their Chinese language learning and teaching on a basic level. However, for children from these places, if they come to Hong Kong and they have to use Chinese to learn, it will be very difficult. So when it comes to developing Hong Kong as an education hub, our focus is on tertiary education. But if school sponsors are interested, they're most welcome to enhance their publicity. The space requirement of students is difficult for Hong Kong schools. Unlike mainland schools, it's difficult for local schools to have a whole floor for STEAM education. However, we provide subsidies for schools to convert existing facilities into, say, a STEAM room for education, or alternatively, schools may make use of our resource centers to support their STEAM education. We also offer reach-out services. You don't necessarily need a fixed room. It can be a school hall or a covered playground for STEAM activities to be conducted. Thank you. Next, Mr. Wai Kwok. For Hong Kong to develop, we need an increase in population. I think it's worth at least our discussion as to whether Hong Kong can develop into a metropolitan city of 10 million people. However, we do need to have to enhance the GDP per capita as well. We don't just rely on the local population to grow. We need to attract people to come to Hong Kong as well. We now have this opportunity to look into various areas. Yes, I do agree that the quality of VPAT should be enhanced continuously. We now talk about multiple pathways. There is a need to enhance the quality of VPAT. We need talents of different areas with different skills and talents. Talents with vocational and professional skills are hotly sought after by other countries. I think it's only natural for VPAT institutions to develop into University of Applied Sciences. I do hope that one of the institutions can become UAS in Hong Kong. When it comes to attracting students from overseas, we can't just rely on universities. We can make use of VPAT institutions and UAS. In the 2023 policy address, we don't just talk about attracting them to come to Hong Kong. Well, for students of higher diploma curriculum from 2024-25, when they graduate, they can stay in Hong Kong to work. These are very good policies. I have some comments to make. our policies in the past is that if you stay in Hong Kong to continue your education, then you must be studying in a postgraduate program. But now we have something similar for graduate programs. And the policy address talks about high diploma courses. So when they stay, after the high diploma courses, they would like to articulate with graduate programs. I have reflected my view to the Education Bureau already. Students from the mainland or overseas who are studying in tertiary education institutes, we need to lift restrictions and allow them to take up part-time work. In this way, we can attract students who don't have the means to study without working to come to Hong Kong. When they take up part-time work in Hong Kong, it's a different way for them to better integrate into Hong Kong. Please be mindful of your time. Yes. Hong Kong students studying overseas, in the past, it was easy for them to take up part-time work, but that's no longer the case. I do think that if you can remove the barriers or lift restrictions to allow them to work here, it would be even better. Under Secretary, I thank the member for his views. He's also asked some questions. The enhancement measures to allow students to stay in Hong Kong and the issue of allowing them to take up part-time work in Hong Kong, we will further consider whether there is any room for us to do more. I do agree that allowing them to stay in Hong Kong to work or taking up internship places is a way to attract overseas students to come to Hong Kong, which is conducive to building Hong Kong into an international education hub. Over the years, the UGC has relaxed limitations of UGC-funded students to allow non-local students to take part in internship programs. We've heard the members' view. We'll see whether we can put in place more enhancement measures. Mr. Low talked about VPET as well as VPET institutions as well as UAS. We agree that they are important. Last year we had the alliance of UAS. Currently we have two such universities, the Metropolitan University and St. Francis University. The alliance has an added function. They can make use of the alliance to organize activities such as overseas exchanges or participation in overseas fairs and exhibitions. Just now, the member talked about the eye. We have two UAS now. Other tertiary institutions can take part in different activities to enhance their status. Some of these institutions can enroll non-local students. We hope that with enhancement in publicity, the competitiveness of these institutes will be enhanced. Well, the last one is myself. I've heard a lot from other members. They are all very concerned about the increase in Hong Kong's population and the magnitude of the increase. That is, whether it's sufficient to support our development. It's very important to attract people to come to Hong Kong. They may be VPET, they may be a talent with different skills or students. We will use more resources on education. The latest figure is $106.8 billion. Given our current physical situation, are there any initiatives that are obsolete? Are there items that are not as efficient or underused? Can we reallocate these resources to areas to get a higher return or to get a higher efficiency? We heard about the population projection as well as the areas where we need more manpower supply, say for example skilled labor. So, with the information of the population projection, has the Education Bureau made any plannings, made any redeployment of resources to support the changes?
多謝主席。
Undersecretary, thank you, Chairman, for your questions. In relation to the use of resources, when it comes to education, we make sure resources are spent on areas that do require them. With the decrease in the number of students, for the unit cost per student, owing to fewer students, the total amount will also be lower. For example, for DSS, we provide subsidies per student. So if there are fewer students, the total resources will also be fewer. For kindergartens, we provide subsidies per student as well. For different education activities, is it possible to consolidate them? Of course, it's possible. On a school level, we always talk about easing the pressure on students. More activities will bring much pressure to both students as well as teachers. We have the 4Rs Mental Health Charter. We emphasize relaxation, rests, for example. We can organize one single activity to achieve multiple goals. We don't have to necessarily organize multiple activities. We will take stock of the situation, and if appropriate, we will also conduct consolidation. For obsolete activities, we may make adjustments. When it comes to manpower projection, the Education Bureau has been working with the Labor and Welfare Bureau very closely in preparing the manpower projection. Talents across different education qualifications, how much do we need? The Education Bureau provides the relevant figures and statistics to the Labor and Welfare Bureau. We have close liaison with the Labor and Welfare Bureau. In relation to any possible follow-up, say for technical workers or the training for them, we have been working with institutions. When programs are created, we need to have an idea of the number of students that will enroll in these programs. With fewer students, probably some programs may not be chosen by that many students. There are student quotas for different programs, but it does not mean that there are sufficient students signing up for these programs. In relation to the promotion of VPET education, we have different subsidy schemes. Say the study subsidy scheme for designated professions or sectors. That's a way to provide greater incentives for students to sign up for these programs, and this is exactly one of the ways to address the manpower shortage in Hong Kong. We are working on different fronts. Thank you, Chairman. Does any other member wish to speak? Next agenda item, any other business? There's no other business. The next meeting will be conducted on the 14th of February 2025 at 10:45 a.m. Members can refer to the list of discussion items circulated among members. The next topic of the meeting will be building an inclusive society. If there is no any other business, meeting adjourned. Thank you, members.